Dylan Lonergan, the defensive line, the secondary. Are we overreacting to what these groups and players should be like this year? We'll talk about it.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black of 247's Eagle Insider. I've been the host of this show for 5 years, done over 1,000 episodes, and we are your place to go if you're looking for Boston College news, analysis, and scoops. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. We are deep into the offseason now, and people are starting to have thoughts. They're having their reactions to what's going on in the world of college football. And today, I want to look at a few overreactions that have been going on with BC. And to talk about them, I'm going to bring in Mitchell Wolfe of Eagle Insider. Mitch, how's it going?
It's going well. There was something with my mic. I hope you can still hear me.
Yep.
If we can cut this. But anyways, excited to be back on talking about this. Been a lot of talk I'm seeing going around from BC fans on various platforms. So I think this is a good time to maybe dispel some notions.
All right. So today we're going to talk about three overreactions. We're talking about the secondary, the defensive line, and Dylan Lonergan. The quarterback position is going to be probably one of the biggest conversation pieces all offseason, as Bill O'Brien still has not really specifically named a quarterback to the public yet. You have Dylan Lonergan, you have Grayson James. There's a lot of positive vibes going on about Dylan Lonergan. Tell me more about this.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be a Boston College offseason if we didn't have a question about the quarterback position, even though we kind of have a feeling as to who the starter is going to be. But I think we obviously feel that Bill O'Brien's doing this kind of like he did last year, where he's doing it to maintain a tactical advantage over the opponents, because then if they have to plan for two quarterbacks, even though Lonergan and James are relatively similar, especially compared to when you looked at last year with Thomas Castellanos and Grayson James, even though Grayson James was hurt going into week one. But all the reports out of this seem to be that Dylan Lonergan is playing very well, that James is playing fine, but kind of about the same level that we saw last year. There was I don't know exactly what to call it. I don't want to say a tiff, but a bit of a freak out on BC Twitter a few weeks ago, where people were worried that Grayson James was going to enter the transfer portal, thus leaving BC with true freshman Shaker Reisig as their backup quarterback, given that Jacoby Robinson was also entering the portal, but that never happened. So Grayson James is still going to be around. He's obviously still competing for the starting job. And again, we were wrong on Grayson James last year. We've been pretty open about that. But I think that the lessons of the process, in terms of, we don't want to, read too much into this, the spring and summer practice reports, is the lesson we should take away from this. Because again, I would say leaving spring, we felt pretty good about last year about Castellanos being the starter still. And then it seemed like in the early parts of summer, that might have been starting to shift before James got hurt. And then, Thomas Castellanos starts the season, plays decently well for a bit, then doesn't play as well. In Grayson James's first start, they mentioned that he was slated to win the job until he injured himself. So that was something we were kind of surprised to hear. Again, I'm still not sure of the veracity of it, or if it was kind of some revisionist cover for the coaching staff. But regardless, I think that can't. I just hope we're not. I know you just did the whole episode saying the quarterback rankings for the ACC are all out of whack, but I think there's some. It's fair to say, the BC quarterback position is a bit of a question mark, because we still don't know who's going to be the starter. We know Grayson James played pretty well to end the season, aside from the bowl game, which there's some mitigating factors there. But the fact remains that when he was faced with a lackluster offensive line, couldn't really have a running game, couldn't really get a running game going, and he had to kind of do it by himself, things kind of went off the rails. Now, BC has a pretty easy start to the schedule in 2025, so that's at least good if he were to be a starter, that he can kind of warm up and the rest of the team can get warmed up against the likes of Fordham, Stanford, Cal, what have you. But again, he played well, but there were some flaws. He wasn't perfect by any means, and so therefore we look at the reports about Lonergan and say, okay, if he can take what James was doing, but clean up some of the mistakes and add even more explosive plays, then we are talking about something interesting. But I think we need to hold off on making grand proclamations about really either of the players.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at what some of the thoughts are, right? As you said, I think BC fans are getting into that mind frame of last year where it was like, oh, we missed out on Grayson James. Everyone, he was supposed to be the guy all along, and everyone was talking about Thomas Castellanos, and I think everyone's already fallen in love with Dylan Lonergan.
And there's not to mention there's the revisionist history of saying, oh, if we had just started Grayson James the whole year, BC would have gone 9-3 or whatever. And
yeah.
I just disagree with that. I think once you get into that alternative history discussion, then things really go off the rails. And I think those arguments just don't hold up because things like, sure, some things could go better. Things could also go very wrong. So, I don't want to put too much. I don't give those too much credit. But I think that what you're saying about how this is moving forward is correct. So go ahead.
So where do you think Bill O'Brien's mind is right now? Kind of they're just going to start summer and see how it goes again and just kind of evaluate again. And then maybe like a week or two in, name a starter, or how do you think he's going to, if you were Bill O'Brien, how would you handle it?
I think deep down, he's kind of thrilled about this. I think that if you look at how he's handled almost every position since taking over this job, it has been whoever comes to work and practices hard and practices the best and is most consistent, you're going to be the starter. And I think you can make the argument that was going to be Grayson James until he got hurt. If you look at some of the other positions, you see where that happens. You saw a guy like Jerron Bradley that we were very excited about going into the year, just really couldn't get on the field much, especially towards the end of the year. I'm not saying not making a comment about his practice abs or anything, just saying like they liked Reed Harris more. They liked what other guys were giving them more. So they're, where I think he's just playing his best guys, and he doesn't really have any assumptions or outside loyalties where it's like, all right, we're going to play this guy for this reason, blah, 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 blah. So I think even though he does have this, connection to Lonergan, I think he really respects James and what he brought to the team last year. I think he knows that James is obviously an older player who's played a good bit of football. The team respects him clearly. So yeah, I think he's going to say, listen, whoever wins the job is going to be the guy. And I think this was part of the discussion about when people were concerned that James was leaving, was that, oh, they should play James because if they don't, then, and this was now that there really isn't a portable, it doesn't matter. But people were concerned, oh, if the window is close, if the difference between the two is close in terms of play, they should play James because he's an older player and they have more years of eligibility to use with Lonergan. Whereas if they do the opposite, there's the chance of great James to transfer. Again, that's not as much of an issue now, but it still factors in that I think he's just going to go with whichever guy is best, and it doesn't matter. He doesn't need to worry about, okay, like we have this eligibility concern. This guy might be the long-term future of the program. It's like, no, we're just going to play who's ever best for the position, who's ever best for the offense, and that's all it's going to be.
I'm very interested too this summer to see how quickly he names a starter, because I felt like Jeff Hafley would wait until they were on the field, but he hid everything. Like practices were hidden. I would not be surprised within like a week or two if O'Brien just shows up at a press conference and says, yeah, Grayson James is our starter. Yeah, Dylan Lonergan's our starter, whatever the case may be. I feel like he's not going to hold that back. I feel like he'll just name it.
I think if somebody does distinguish themselves to that point, I could see that happening. I'm just a little skeptical that will happen. I think it will be pretty close going into week one. So I wouldn't be shocked the other way. I also think back to a few years ago when they sent Emmett Moorhead to AC Media Days and then ended up he basically had lost the starting job before the end of the first half of the first game. So I think BC has enough veteran players on the team where they'll send somebody who isn't a quarterback to AC Media Days. So that won't be an indicator. Like if you look at the offense, even though you do lose a lot of leaders in Oz Trapillo, Drew Kendall, so what have you could send a guy like Jeremiah Franklin, who's been around, who's senior, played 4 years, been around the program. You could send Jude Bowery. You could send Logan Taylor. You could send Alex Broom come back from injury. You could send Lewis. They'll probably send Lewis Bond, honestly, because he's been around a while. He's had some productive years. I don't know exactly. He's a bit of a character. Like he's got some personality. Like he's gonna not just have the most boring answers to questions. But so I think I could see them sending him, and therefore. And also then Bill O'Brien can say, okay, we don't have to like show our hand by sending a quarterback to AC Media Days.
Do you think he could wait all the way up to like Fordham Prep week?
Oh yeah, for sure. And honestly, part of me thinks that the Fordham game might be an audition. like a final dress rehearsal, if you will.
Oh my gosh.
Because I've started my looking into teams that BC is going to play in 2025, and looking at Fordham. So I was texting you about this. So um, BC played Duquesne last year, beat them 56-0, crushed them. Like it was over before it really began. And Duquesne ended up beating, I think it was Central Connecticut State 33-3. And then Central Connecticut State beat Fordham at the end of the year, I think 21-14. And Fordham turned the ball over 8 times.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
And looking at their roster, this team is not getting better this year. And they went 2-10 last year in the Patriot League, which is not the best FCS conference. Now, granted, and the Northeast Conference, which Duquesne came from, is probably one of the worst, honestly. Patriot League is a little bit better, but not crazy. So I think they're going to be playing an even easier FCS team to open the season. It would not shock me if this was kind of like they treat it like a preseason game where, maybe Grayson gets the start, but he gets 2 drives, Lonergan gets 2 drives, and they kind of alternate for the first half. And maybe once it's 42-0 at halftime, they're like, all right, we're gonna put in Shaker or whatever, and what is it, Shane Hannafin now?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's gonna be interesting, and that's gonna drive our fans crazy. So we'll talk more about that as
Bill O'Brien is in it for the content. He knows what gets views and clicks.
it's gonna the August shows are gonna be a lot of quarterback talk. So in a moment, let's switch it up. Let's talk about the defensive line. Lots of question marks here. We'll talk about what we should be expecting here. How are we reacting to this? Is it scary? Is it not? We'll get into that in just a moment. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a full complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you can stop managing your money and starting to build wealth. With a family of 4, I never realized how much money I was spending going out to eat with my family. But now with Monarch Money, I can track it. I saw it. I made some changes in my life. My wife was happy about it too. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at Monarch Money for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Locked On Boston College, AJ Black here. If you've not already checked it out, check out Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin. He goes over everything going on in the world of college football. He has special guests. If there's anything BC related, I'd be a guest on there, but it's been kind of quiet lately. But he's got special guests on there. You can check that on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And I also want to shout out everyone who makes Locked On BC your first listen every day. It really does mean a lot to us. It helps more Boston College fans find us. When you guys listen to your 5 shows a week, I want to shout you all out who do that every single day. Now let's go to the other side of the ball. Defensive side of the ball. Obviously the big losses, 2 big losses for BC, Donovan Azaraku and Cam Horsley, really impact what the expectations. But Mitch and I have talked about that defensive line moving forward. What are the overreactions going on with this defensive line right now, Mitch?
I think there's a lot of them. I think that so as I talked about a few weeks ago, I wrote this treatise. I think that would be putting it lightly. Yeah, we'll say that. I wrote these treatises, I guess, on BC's pass rush and what they'll need to do next year to recreate Donovan Azaraku and Cam Horsley in the aggregate. And honestly, at this point, they have to replace their entire starting defensive line now that George Rooks hit the portal and Neto Ekpala graduated. Granted, you bring back Quintavious Hutchins, so he was the starter at the end of the year, but you get the point. So looking at that, there's obviously the overreaction that, BC's pass rush is going to be terrible next year. That that's going to be back to 2023 where they didn't get any sack. They got 1 sack per game on average and got 6 against Virginia in 1 game. So it was pretty much even worse than that. Virginia had the worst offensive line in the FBS that year. So there's a lot of factors that went into it, but that's the worry that's going to happen, even though BC was ranked quite highly in pressure rate that year. So I don't think that's going to happen, as I wrote about in that piece. I think Tim Lewis is very good at creating and designing exotic blitzes and pressures to get pressure on the quarterback. I also think adding Jordan Thomas, the new defensive line coach, replacing Jeff Commissiong is going to be good, because I think getting a younger coach who will maybe have some more new ideas about stuff will kind of invigorate that room. Because honestly, I felt that Jeff Commissiong, or I felt the defensive line didn't do that much last year. Aside from Ezra Rock, who had an elite season, Cam Horst was excellent. Those guys were, fourth and fifth year seniors who are just bigger and better and older than everybody. And I think their work to improve themselves is what made them good. And I'm not really sure it was coaching as much, because if you look at their previous year, they're pretty much playing the same way. They just played a little bit better, but I just didn't really see the coaching with the other players. Like, your Nedowick Paula didn't really improve. Quintavious Hutchins did. So maybe it worked for him, but a lot of the other guys, Rooks, Owen Stoudemire, those all guys were kind of all just the same players that we've seen for the last few years. So I think getting a new coach in there will be good. My other thing though is I'm looking at it from the other side of it, where people are looking at some of these transfers that are coming in and saying, "Oh, this it's gonna be like just like it was in 2024 with all the sacks they were getting." And I think I want to push back on that a little bit, because even though I was somebody who was very excited about Anya Nwosisi, it seems like I might have been giving him too rosy an outlook, given that he's not playing with the starters as much in practice from what we have seen. So they have a lot of bodies, and that's good. Like, you want to have swings at the bat. You want to have guys with different skill sets that can do a lot of stuff. That's good to see. But I'm still a little skeptical of guys who are coming from D2 schools, who are coming from places where they didn't play barely at all. And Makai Byerson and Chris Marable, who they're at Power 5 schools, they're at ACC school. They weren't really playing that much. And they're young play. Makai Byerson's a very young player. So Ella Boykin's coming from Barton College, which is a D2 school. And he had a very good freshman season. I'll give him that. But it's, that's a big leap in production. Favor Bate, he played defensive tackle at 240 pounds at Merrimack. He's going to have to move outside. They're going to have to kind of have a designer role for him. So I'm kind of trying to middle the pass rush or the defensive line argument here, because it's going to be a little weird. I think it's going to take some time to gel and figure out who plays best where and when. But I think it's going to be a fine unit. I don't think it's going to be elite. I don't think it's going to be terrible. So I'm kind of saying, let's try to find the middle here and not go crazy with going either way in either direction.
So it seems to me like it's going to be like a jigsaw puzzle right now, where there's just they have a bunch of different pieces. It's going to be up to Jordan Thomas with Tim Lewis and Bill O'Brien to figure out where to put those pieces to make it most effective.
And there are going to be times where their puzzle doesn't get put together, where things aren't fitting, and especially against better offensive lines, like when they play Clemson, when they play Notre Dame, when they play Georgia Tech, when they play SMU, when they play Louisville, when they play these good teams, it's going to be a bit of a struggle. And we saw that when BC played Louisville, played Virginia Tech in the middle of the season, where they really had struggles getting to the passer. Now, some of those were external issues with the opposite team, the offense they ran, what have you. But, it's going to be a complicated thing to do, but I'm hopeful at least that the defensive coach is going to figure it out to put a serviceable group out there on the defensive line. And I think that somebody, I'm not exactly sure who, again, there's a lot of new faces, somebody's going to come out of this and be like, okay, that's like the new guy. Like, he's going to be starter going forward, breakout year. So it's going to happen with somebody. I'm just not sure who yet. And I think everybody's got pretty even odds at this point of who it's going to be.
I started off, I think, the beginning of February, saying it was going to be Clive Wilson. And I'm backing off on that, like real hard off of that. No offense to Clive. I'm just saying, I'm not sure. I don't think that's going to be.
You didn't want to put all your chips on a guy who's played like 5 snaps.
Correct. Yeah. I got to say, watching just spring, Favor Bate looked pretty cool.
Yeah.
And again, he's coming from Merrimack. He's an underclassman, but he made plays that made me go, there's something there. And so maybe it's not this year that he does something. Maybe it's next year, but I feel like they got something there with him, right, that has really caught my attention.
And like for him specifically, what I imagine they would want to do with him is he, as a 6'2", 240, 200, maybe 250 pound defensive lineman who played defensive tackle at the FCS. What I imagine they're going to do with him is he is not going to play on first and second down. They're going to bring him out on third downs, and they're going to move him around. They'll put him in the B gap where he can use his athleticism to beat guards and interior linemen. They'll use him in stunts and line games where he can loop around the offensive line and again use his movement skills. but he's not going to play on early downs because it's like we don't want to, even on the edge. Like we're not like just because he needs to learn how to play the run from the edge as opposed to playing it from a defensive tackle position. So that's one. And then even kind of the opposite side of the coin, Chuck Nenato, the nose tackle from Elon, he's 6 foot 320 pounds. He's not going to play on any third downs. He's going to play first downs, second downs that are 5 yards or shorter. They'll probably rotate him out on second and longs because he's probably not going to give you any pass rush. And you have guys that can give you some pass rush in guys like I think Chris Marable could be something, but even guys like Sedarius McConnell, Owen Stoudemire had some flashes. And I also think Jason Hewlett, the linebacker transfer from Michigan, is somebody who can really unlock this defense with his versatility. We'll have to see how that goes because again, he hasn't played much, but just his athletic background and what they could do with him and how they used guys last year, I foresee a path where he could become a very impactful player for this defense. And also, I do want to say this because it's all pass rush, and that's what's sexy, and that's what gets the numbers. But I'm not really concerned about run defense. I think that obviously Cam Horsley was a huge part of that unit, as Rocco as well. But I think BC is across the board coached well in that department. I think that getting guys like Davian Crouch and Owen McGowan back will be big because they're veteran players. Obviously, they were hurt in spring, but they'll be back and they should be okay. So getting those guys back will be huge. You're still going to have big dudes in the middle that'll be hard to move in. And they're also, again, they're older guys who are bigger. Your Quan Williams, your Chuck Nenato, even Owen Stoudemire if he's playing 3-tech or defensive end in the 3-4 base. Those are guys that know what they're doing and they'll be able to defend the run well. So I'm not super worried about that. And the pass rush is kind of a let's wait and see. It could be maybe not where we want it to be, but it's not going to. I don't think it's going to be this crater where it's like BC is not getting anything from that department.
And in terms of run defense, you don't have to play by Shell Tootin this year, so that's always a positive too.
Very true.
So one quick little note, I just going to take a side note here. We're talking about Donovan Ezeraku. I felt really old. They offered a 2028 recruit named Aiden Ezeraku, who is Donovan's much, much younger brother out of Williamstown. He's an edge rusher. He's a little smaller than Donovan, but he's also a freshman. So he's 6'1".
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure what year he was. So I was like,
so 2028.
Okay.
So 2028.
It's like smaller than Donovan. That's very concerning for an edge rusher.
but it is Donovan's brother. So that's interesting to see if that ends up, if BC can end up bringing him here or whatever.
Gotta think they feel pretty good about that one.
Yeah. Syracuse was already pushing for him too. So maybe it's just the lineage, All right. In a moment,
we know they struggle coming up with original ideas over there.
All right. In a moment, let's talk about the secondary. I think there's a lot of expectations. Let's get into that in just a moment. Welcome back. This is Locked On Boston College. I'm your host, AJ Black. I'm here with Mitchell Wolfe of Eagle Insider. And I want to tell you, if you have another episode that you want to check out Locked On ACC. I've been on the squad. I know a lot of folks didn't like it when I wasn't on it, but they seem to like it when I am on it. So I've been talking. There's a new episode that came out on Friday. I was one of like 4 hosts on that one. I was on the week before. Check it out. It comes out on our YouTube and podcast feed. If you want to listen to it, it's more of a general view of the ACC and my takes on that. I talked about Berge Nigerian and Bill Belichick two episodes ago. If you really want to, Jordan Hudson and that whole thing.
Are we gonna get locked on Maine beauty pageants soon?
Apparently, yeah, yep. So let's wrap this up. The secondary. I am very excited about where the secondary is because I think there's a lot of talent on there. Mm-hmm. Tell me where your thoughts are on the secondary.
I think this group has a very good chance to be one of the best secondaries that we've seen at BC in a while. And I was thinking back to years past. I think most recently, I would say 2021, when they had Elijah Jones, Josh DeBerry, Brandon Sebastian, Jason Maitre. They got Jaden Lars Woodby. They still had Jamin Muse as backup. I think did they still have Deion Jones that year? Yep. He didn't play much, but yeah, you had a lot of guys, and that was a pretty good group for most of the season, even though obviously the offense didn't give them much in the middle of the year. But that was a pretty good secondary, I would say. Going back further than that, you actually have to go back a while. The one that I found was you got to go back to like 2017, which is when you had Will Harris, John Johnson, Tajamir Torres. I guess 2017, you might have had Yidam and more. No, that was a little later, but Lucas Dennis. That whole group, which was a really special group, and I think we're close to that. I think because I love KP Price. I think he's one of the best safeties in the ACC, very underrated player. Amari Jackson's coming back. I think given how ACCs heal these days, ACLs heal these days, I feel like he'll probably be ready to go early in the season. And even if he isn't, you probably don't need him for Fordham. I'd like to have him for Michigan State. Probably don't need him for Stanford. So, you can maybe slow play that rehab and getting him back in the field a little bit. You have Max Tucker, who I would say took big steps from 2023. Still had some rough moments, but some of it came later in the season when you're asking him to be CB1 when that should have been Amari Jackson. That's fine. He's a solid player. You saw some flashes from Ashton McShane, and again, took his lumps as true freshman. There were some bad games, bad plays. And at the slot defenders were the only, free safety. You could say Carter Davis had, again, some very big flashes. He also had few rough moments here and there, but again, first year's starter, was playing safety for like the first time. So the big question mark is the slot defender position. You bring back Cam Martinez, but outside of that Virginia Tech game, it was pretty rough. So ideally, you hope that a new coach can maybe get to him and he can be healthy this year and be ready to go and play a little better. Alternatively, you've got a bunch of guys that can compete for that position. Like I think you could realistically see any of the three corners I mentioned compete for that job. You could see Carter Davis, Omar Thornton, Sire Torrance all compete for that job. You could see maybe they try to move KP Price down there. So they basically play like a 3 safety package. So you have Davis and Thornton on the back end, and then Price is in the slot, kind of in the box as a hybrid, which could be interesting. So they have a lot of choice there. And I think that, like I've said with O'Brien, like he's going to get the best guys out there. They're going to figure something out there that's going to be that slot position will at least be solid. And the rest of secondary is at least good or progressing towards being good. So I like that the schedule to start the season is a little easier. They can get warmed up, figure out who's the best, who's playing best where. And then once we get in October, we hit the ground, BC hits ground running on that side of the defense. And this could be a really good group.
It's gonna be interesting. Yeah, and they got some tough matchups in there too. Like
I haven't kept up with exactly the names, but seems like a lot of the true freshmen that they brought in that early enrolled were playing pretty well in the spring. So you could see some of those guys maybe get some snaps early in the season, and if they impress, maybe they take a job, or if somebody gets hurt, they can come in and it's not going to be this huge drop off. So that's I would say Jeff Hafley does deserve some credit. When he left this cupboard pretty stacked with guys that are coming in and being meaningful contributors.
Yeah, so the 3 freshmen that came in early, Ashton Cunningham, TJ Green, and Najita Sankala, I believe they're all corners.
Yes.
So you could see all 3 of them. I highlighted on Eagle Insider earlier Ashton Cunningham, but I could easily have put either of the other 2 guys because I thought they all had moments during camp and looked good.
As somebody who saw Cunningham live for one game in high school, he is pretty small. So I imagine they might be a little wary about putting him out there, given his lack of weight and lack of size. But if he does bulk up over the summer and can keep his speed, when I saw him at that game against Jenks, it was Union versus Jenks. The other team did not throw at him at all. So, and it's not like he's this massive corner who's just pressing the ever-living daylights out of the receivers. 5'10", 150 pounds, and they just did not throw at him at all. So that was something that I noticed. I was like, this is interesting and impressive. And granted, that other team's offense was not very good, but every throw was to the other side of the field. So they weren't even testing him, weren't even trying him. So I was like, that's something notable, and it seems like he has been able to translate that into his play in spring practice.
All right, so let's wrap things up here. So 3 overreactions. We talked about quarterbacks. We talked about the defensive line and secondary. Mitch, where can people find your work? And I got to also shout out, if you have not checked out Mitch's pass rushing treatise that we talked about earlier in Eagle Insider, you're missing out. It has so much film that, like, if you have not watched film, you learn a ton about how defenses run. Check that out. There's a 2-part series. It's a lot. It's deep, so you're gonna need some time for it, but it's very, very good. So check that out. Mitch, what else you got coming up?
That's really it for now. That took up a lot of my time, so now I need to kind of recalibrate and look at some other stuff. Like I said, I'm working on putting together the opponent preview stuff. So we're looking at every team BC is going to play this year. Waiting for my Fordham film to come in so I can watch the abomination that offense is. It's basically it's like the Tennessee offense where it's super wide across the field. Like there's the wide receivers like outside the numbers by the sideline, and they just run RPOs all day. It's very boring, and they're not good. I think the quarterback he threw 10 touchdowns, had 12 interceptions and 14 fumbles or something.
Oh,
so it's
wow.
it's rough. so that'll be a joy to watch. But so just keep your eye on Eagle Insider. We've got a lot of stuff. Obviously, it's not football season, but it's women's lacrosse season. It looks like they won their quarterfinal game, so they're trucking along. So hopefully they can go back to
Play
back.
Yale next.
Yeah, okay, they won last year, right? Am I imagining that or?
Yes.
Yeah. So we're going for back to back there.
Yep. And so we have all sorts of stuff. We have basketball previews where I have Mike Sidley looking at the new transfers. We have a update on what the lineup could look like next year. I also have tons of recruiting stuff. We're about to hit official visit season, which is a ton of news. So come over to Eagle Insider, and we'll have it all up here on Locked On BC too. So check that out as well. We're 5 days a week. I will have all sorts of good stuff for you. Special guests. We're working on getting some more people on here. Thank you all for listening. You can follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. You can follow Mitch at Mitchell T. Wolfe. Make sure you come over to our YouTube page, hit that like and subscribe button. It really does help us out. And we'll see you all again tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Boston College, your team every day.